Senator Bailey on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. I first want to thank Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins for sponsoring, not only sponsoring this resolution, but driving home an important message. And when you are speaking on such a resolution, and I always take great pride in speaking on this resolution, Mr. President, as you know, because it reflects a personal anniversary of sorts. It is when I first spoke on the floor as a new member of the New York State Senate. And I spoke on this resolution, and Senator Lanza is very consistent in what he says, and he said it every year, and he's right about it. This is one of these resolutions that it doesn't matter where you are, we recognize the greatness of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. So I think about this day, and I think about something that Dr. King says, that we must live together as brothers or perish together as fools. We would say today, brothers and sisters. But the most important thing that we have to underline is if we do not come together, we will perish together as fools. The mask may muffle my words, but it does not muffle the message of Dr. King. Luke 12:48 says, "To whom much is given, much is required." And what's required of us is decency, respect. Dr. King's day, his birthday, is January 15th, and the following Monday should always be looked at as a day on, not a day off. It is a day of service for whom many would recognize as the ultimate servant. It's the birthday of one of the greatest peacemakers we've ever had in a time of such nationwide confusion. He's the youngest man to ever receive a Nobel Peace Prize. December 10th, 1964, he got the prize, and at that time it was around $54,000. And he gave that money to the Civil Rights Movement. Now, $54,000 is a lot of money at any time, but the present-day value of that would be $453,728.90. It's a lot of money, Mr. President. He gave on to others. He was a servant. It was for the movement, not for self. And I think about today and what today is in our society and how it's an inauguration day. It's a day of new beginnings. And I started to think that this was coincidental, that we come together on this day, but I'm a man of faith, and my pastor is the Reverend Dr. Allen M. Pinckney at Butler Moore United Methodist Church, 3920 Paulden Avenue. Come see us sometime, Mr. President. And I don't believe in coincidence anymore. I believe that things are supposed to happen the way that they are supposed to happen. January 5th, it was no coincidence that two men who will put the Senate over the top, so to speak, were the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church and Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock, and John Ossoff, a mentee of the late, great John Lewis. I don't believe in coincidences, Mr. President. I don't believe that on today's day, that as we reflect on where we were as a nation, in order to be able to understand where you're going, you have to know where you've been. And Dr. King laid out a blueprint of sorts for us. The Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 26, "If one man suffers, all suffer together with it." And Dr. King's letter from the Birmingham jail, for those who've never read the whole letter, I implore you to read that. It's one of the finest pieces of writing that I've ever read, and that you will ever read too. Dr. King said, "Moreover, I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We don't live in silos. I've said that on this floor many times. We do not live in silos. What happens in the Bronx affects what happens in Brooklyn. What happens in Brooklyn affects what happens in Broome County. We are all interrelated." Mr. President, as you know, I live my life through the lens of my two daughters, Giada and Karina. And, due to the magic of remote learning, I'm able to witness their lessons. And so Karina is in pre-K, and they were talking about it. And the teacher mentioned, before MLK, black and white people would not be able to, black and white kids, excuse me, would not be able to be taught together. In this technology age, Karina presses mute on it. Dad, they couldn't even be on Zoom together? Karina, there was no Zoom. What do you mean there's no Zoom? Well, Karina, we can talk about that later, but the important point is that black and white people could not learn together. She said in real school, like they couldn't sit next to each other? That's not fair. And she said, Dr. King, he really wanted people just to stay together. That's what my 4-year-old got from her teaching. She also asked me, was he really a king and where was his castle? And as she's a Disney fan, so we talked about it at a different day. But Giada, my oldest, and if you recall last year, I mentioned how she spoke about in kindergarten last year. She's in first grade now. She's a big girl now. And she mentioned how she learned last year that Dr. King was arrested and that she believed that he should have never been arrested, and the other people that arrested him, they should have been arrested. She was fired up about that one. But again, the magic of remote learning, I got to listen in on today on the lesson. And first the teacher, they read a book called Marty, and it was a book by Martin Luther King III, and it was his son, and it spoke from a kid's perspective. And the teacher asked Giada, what did you get out of that book? What did you get about Dr. King? And she said, well, he was fearless. He was a leader, and he was determined. Now, as a parent, I am brimming with pride, and I don't want to run over and interrupt her because, kids act differently when they see their parents, so I just wanted to enjoy the moment from afar. And the teacher said, well, why did you say all those things? It sounds right, but why do you say those things? Well, Miss Lynn, he helped to change the law so that people can be together today. No, definitely helped change the law. In 1964, the Civil Rights Movement achieved 2 of its greatest successes: ratification of the 24th Amendment, which abolished the poll tax, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Dr. King did so much. For those who don't know, Happy Birthday, the Stevie Wonder version, that is a song about Dr. King. I think about all of the greatness that he achieved, and I remind myself of this every year, and I'm coming up on that age, Mr. President. Dr. King was only 39 years old when he passed away. And I think about all that he accomplished, all of the speeches, all of the greatness that he was able to pack into 39 years of life. An entirely too small period of time, in my opinion. But God doesn't make mistakes, Mr. President, and the 39 years were used wisely. And I've always wondered, what am I doing wrong? And it's not about what I'm doing wrong, but anybody's doing wrong. It's about what he's done so right. In the mere 39 years, he was able to change the way that we looked at each other in America. And so I think about what would have Dr. King have thought about what's happening now. I think that he would have thought that people that quote him but failed to say that Black Lives Matter, I felt he would have had a problem with that. I think that Dr. King would not have wanted the rancor to have happened at the Capitol, and he would have spoken out about that. I think about his commitment and his faith and his family, and I think about where he would have been and what he would have done. And the answer was always unified. If you look at what he was about bringing us together. And I think about a hip-hop artist by the name of J. Cole. He has a song called Love Yours, and he said there's beauty in the struggle, ugliness in the success. And they talk about sports and how a team hasn't really learned how to win until you can win ugly, until you go on the road against a hostile crowd and a hostile environment, and you come out with the victory. Well, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. faced hostile crowds every single day. It did not deter him. It did not deter his message. It did not deter his fight. It only made him stronger. The time is always right to do what's right. Well, as I close, I think about Lift Every Voice and Sing, one of our unofficial national anthems in the black community. And while, Mr. President, we know that nobody knows anything after the first verse by heart, you just start humming. We do know the final refrain. Let us march on till victory is won. We thank Dr. King for being that drum major, leading that march till victory. And while that march has not stopped, and it cannot stop until victory is won, we thank our drum major for peace. May God bless the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King.